Give it up for Daniela. So when I was a little girl, I used to tell my friends that my dad was the chief. And not just any chief, like not the chief of police or like the chief in the military or anything like that, but the chief in a reservation. And that he was responsible for the reservation and all the Native Americans that lived on that reservation. And I would describe him with the full headdress, that he was tall, and he was handsome, and he was strong, and he was brave, all the things. My dad. The truth was, I had no clue who my dad was. My dad left when I was 3 years old, and the only thing that I ever heard from my mom about my dad was that he was Native American, he was part Native American, and that his family didn't like her too much because she was dark complected. And so my stories seem to be a little more fun to tell than the truth. And so I told those stories because I needed to have an excuse for why my dad wasn't showing up to the track meets and why my dad wasn't showing up for father-daughter dances. And I got this new clarinet and I wanted to practice it in front of my parents and why my dad hadn't showed up for that. That was a better story to tell. And so when my friends didn't see my dad there, I mean, my mom was there, right? That was cool, but having dad there was a little different. My friends had their fathers there, and they had their father figures there, but my dad wasn't there. And so I would say, well, because he's important. He has an entire reservation he has to take care of. That's why he's not here. And so over the years, I really wanted to discover who my dad really was. And so me and my sister set out to kind of figure out where he lived, how to get his address. And I found his address, and so I sent him a letter, and it was, "Hi, Dad, it's me, Danielle. I'm doing really good in school. I'm really smart. Write me back." And he didn't write me back. And so I'm like, oh, you know what, he needs stationery, okay. "Dad, here's some stationery. I'm doing really, really good. I got lots of friends. Here's some stationery. Write me back." And he didn't write me back. And so I'm like, he needs stamps, right? He needs stamps. So I took my allowance and I'm like, "Listen, Dad, I know you couldn't send those letters to me, but here's some stamps. Write me back." And he never wrote me back. And that was okay. That was okay. Because it was probably true. He didn't like us too much. And we were too dark. So as time went on, you know, I thought about my dad, and I spent some time in summer with my cousin, telling my cousin exactly how I was feeling and that I wanted to see my dad. And she stood up and said, "Do you want to go see your dad? I can take you." And I'm looking at her like, how do you know how to get to my dad? And I don't. But that's okay. We set out to go find my dad. I was at the end of my 8th grade year. It was on a Saturday morning before GPS and Google Maps. And we walked the streets of Philadelphia until we found his house. And we showed up to his house. The door was wide open, no screen. And inside the house, I see a man sitting at a table and another man walking towards us. And he was tall and he was handsome. And I said, "That's my dad. I know that's my dad." And my cousin says, "Hey, Uncle Johnny, I brought your daughter." And he looked at me, he patted me on my head, and he said hello, and he walked out the door. He slid up underneath the car to continue to tinker with his car. And I sat there like, "You don't see me? Are you upset that I'm here? Do you not like me? I'm not mad that you didn't write me back." And so I followed him outside, and I got up on my tippy toes, and I looked into the engine while he was underneath it tinkering, and I'm talking to him. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but I was just so glad to have this conversation. And my grandpa comes out, and he looks at me, and he was like, "Ooh, yeah, you're a Hairston, I can tell. You look just like us." And so he reached over into his water ice stand and grabbed me this really cool water ice. And if you're from Philadelphia, you know how important water ice is. Yes. And so I'm licking on my water ice and I'm thinking to myself, this is the connection that I've been looking for. And so over time, we tried to stay connected. I continued to write letters. My dad started to call me and was talking to me on the phone, and he got more comfortable. I got more comfortable with him. And, I didn't know why he did not want to be in our lives. And he finally said, my life was shitty. I didn't have anything to give to you. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. But I'm so glad that you gave me a second chance. I'm so glad that you invited me back into your life. And so for the first time, I got the dad that I wanted. 3 kids later, I had my children, and I moved him into my house, and he became the best grandpa I ever could ask for, and the best dad. He taught my kids everything, math and science and all the things. He even taught them how to plant food. Didn't really quite understand that you needed more land to plant pumpkins. And so pumpkins was busting out the concrete, but he did it. He was there, he was present, he was my dad. And so life continued to go on, and he continued to be there. And then 2005, my dad passed away. I was angry because I lost him a second time, and it took me years to reconcile losing my dad again. But for 14 years, I had my dad. I had the best grandpa, I had the best daddy, I had everything. And there's a little girl out there somewhere, her name's Danielle, and she is making up a story about who her dad is. And there's a dad out there somewhere running. My dad was a runner, yes he was, and he had a lot of demons he was running from, but guess what? He was my dad, and he is my chief. Thank you.
Give it up for Danielle one more time, y'all. If that didn't bring a tear to your eye, I don't know what can. Oh my gosh, Danielle, you're such a prolific storyteller, and every time you grace the stage here with the Moffats, it's such a blessing.